In the summer of 1882, the skies over the ancient city of Alexandria turned black with smoke. British warships, part of the mighty Royal Navy, opened fire, unleashing hell on the port. The official story from London was simple. They were protecting the Suez Canal, the vital artery connecting Britain to its prized colony, India. But behind this official justification lay a much darker and more cynical truth. This wasn't a military operation in the traditional sense. It was a foreclosure, a debt collection carried out with cannons and warships. To understand how it came to this, we need to go back a decade earlier, to the rule of Khedive, known as Ismail the Magnificent. He had a grand vision. He dreamed of transforming Cairo into a modern, glittering capital, a true Paris on the Nile. To fund this dream, he borrowed staggering amounts of money from European banks. Palaces shot up from the desert sands. Grand opera houses were built, and wide, sweeping boulevards were carved through the old city. Fortunes were spent, and for a while, the dreams seemed to be coming true. But dreams funded by debt often turn into nightmares. By the time the construction dust settled, Egypt was drowning. The national treasury was completely overwhelmed, unable to pay even the interest on its massive loans. This was the moment Britain and France had been waiting for. But they didn't arrive with a bailout or a relief package. Instead, they seized control. They established a new regime called the Caisse de la Dette Publique, which translates to the Public Debt Commission. This was essentially a council of European financial controllers who took over every aspect of Egypt's finances. Their mission was brutally simple: ensure that the bondholders back in London and Paris got paid, no matter the cost to the Egyptian people. The consequences were immediate and devastating. The salaries for essential workers like soldiers and teachers were slashed. Taxes on ordinary people were raised sharply, pushing many into poverty. Food shortages began to spread across the country as resources were diverted to service the debt. To many Egyptians, this felt like a new form of tyranny, a kind of early MF austerity program imposed by foreign powers. Then came a revelation that should have shaken the British Empire to its core. The British Prime Minister at the time was William Gladstone. Publicly, Gladstone was known for his moralistic speeches, often denouncing the evils of imperialism. He presented himself as a man of principle, but behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding. It was discovered that Gladstone himself secretly owned thousands of pounds worth of Egyptian bonds. In today's money, this personal investment would be worth millions. The man who was preaching morality and condemning empire had a direct, personal financial stake in making sure Egypt continued to pay its crushing, unbearable debts. His public pronouncements were a mask for his private greed. As the suffering of the Egyptian people intensified, so did their anger. The simmering resentment finally boiled over into a full-blown nationalist movement. At its head was a charismatic army officer named Urabi. His movement rallied under a powerful and simple slogan: Egypt for the Egyptians. Urabi and his followers weren't just protesting. They had a plan. They threatened to conduct a full audit of the national debt, to expose the predatory interest rates and unfair terms that had been forced upon them. Most dangerously for the European powers, they wanted to end foreign control over their country's finances. To the investors in Europe, this was completely unacceptable. In the financial heart of the empire, the city of London, Urabi's movement was seen as a direct and existential threat. The situation reached a breaking point. Rumors began to fly that Urabi was planning to halt all debt repayments entirely. Panic ripped through the European markets. Bondholders feared they would lose everything. The financial elite demanded action. And so, the British government, led by the secretly invested Prime Minister Gladstone, decided to send a message. On July 11th, 1882, the order was given. British warships, under the command of Admiral Seymour, began their bombardment of Alexandria. This was not a fair fight. It wasn't a battle between two armies. It was a one-sided assault, a brutal act of intimidation. For 10 straight hours, shells rained down on the city. The destruction went far beyond any conceivable military necessity. Homes, markets, and ancient landmarks were reduced to rubble. The bombardment was a spectacle of power, designed to be seen and understood around the world. The message was clear and unmistakable, not just to Egypt, but to every other indebted nation on the planet. Debts will be paid, and if you refuse, we have navies to collect them. The roar of the cannons was the sound of international finance asserting its dominance. After the smoke finally cleared, British troops landed on the shores. They marched inland and swiftly crushed the Urabi Revolt. The dream of Egypt for the Egyptians was extinguished in blood and fire. In the aftermath, the system of foreign control, known as the dual control, was not just restored, it was tightened. British and French accountants now had even more power, overseeing every single pound that flowed through the Egyptian treasury. Egypt's independence, which had been flickering for years, was now effectively gone. The country became a de facto colony, its fate decided not by its own people, but by bankers and politicians in London and Paris. A new and insidious era of imperialism had begun, one driven not just by armies and flags, but by debt, bonds, and balance sheets. This wasn't just the story of a city being bombarded. It was the story of the world's first modern war for debt, a chilling precedent that showed how finance could become a weapon of conquest and how a nation's sovereignty could be foreclosed upon, just like a house. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of hidden history interesting, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories they didn't teach you in school. See you next time.